Broadcasting live from atop the Rocky Mountains, the crossroads of the West. You are listening to the Liberty Roundtable Radio Talk Show.
All right. Happy to have you along, my fellow Americans. Sam Bushman live on your radio. Hard-hitting news the networks refuse to use, no doubt, starts now. This, my fellow Americans, is the broadcast for June 9th in the year of our Lord 2025. This is our one of two, and the goal always to protect life, liberty, and property, to promote God, family, and country, and to do so on your radio in the traditions of our founding fathers. Yes, indeed, ladies and gentlemen, we use the blueprint for liberty, the supreme law of the land, the Constitution for the United States of America as our guide. As you know, we love the checks and balances brilliantly put in place by the founders, and we reject revolution. Unless it's the Jesus Revolution, then we're in because we follow the Prince of Peace. Hope you guys had an absolutely God, family, country-style weekend. I know I did, and I apologize for being off the air for several days, travel, plus a little bit of sickness on my part and a few things. Wow, it's been rough, but we are back stronger than ever, live on your radio, and the best part is the good doctor, Dr. Scott Bradley, author of the incredible collegiate series, To Preserve the Nation. All available at freedomrisingsun.com. Now with me, welcome to the show, sir.
Well, good morning, Sam, and it is wonderful to hear you back. I mean, it's been a while since we've had a chance to visit, you know, and so maybe everybody figured we'd kind of gone dormant or something.
Not a chance. I've been releasing some videos along the way, though, so people should have some updated content there available at libertyroundtable.com and lovingliberty.net. Not only was I traveling and got sick a little bit and all that kind of stuff, you were traveling too, right?
Yeah, I did have some traveling. I still did some, I gave some addresses and programs and stuff like that. We did have last week our network was just blown up. I mean, I can't imagine how often this happens where, and I don't know if I'm doing something wrong. I mean, pilot error can always enter into a lot of things, but it's just interesting to me that sometimes everything goes radio silent in terms of the technology that's available, and we're not doing anything different, but suddenly somewhere along the line somebody decides to pull the plug on us, and man, that's frustrating. We cobbled together some things that would have and should have been done, but man alive, it's kind of...
So you did not, or you did do the webinar on Thursday?
We did do a webinar on Thursday.
Okay, good.
It was very truncated in terms of participation, I guess. Probably hundreds of people didn't get invited, and so we started getting bombarded with text and email and phone calls and everything else like that from people who are saying, "Hey, where's my cookie? I think I want to go to this party," and they didn't get a chance to.
Well, that's what happens now. If you're peddling perversions, I'm sure you would have been on the air solid as a rock. See, but when you talk about God, family, and country, it's a little different,
Indeed.
We certainly battle the demons everywhere they are. So give us a quick update on the weekly Q&R webinars, Thursdays at 7 p.m. Go to freedomrisingsun.com. Sign up. You'll get your cookie, or you'll get your email, or
if you
login
can sign
codes.
up,
And
we
check
still
it
need to
out.
be fixing it.
Yeah, so do that. But what did you primarily discover? Because the reason I want to do this first is because we got an incredible weekend discussion to have. But before we do, hey, the webinar was right before all that kicked off, right?
Yes, it was. And the things that were interesting were the things that came up were monumental. And this, like you say, over the weekend we had La Raza trying to offset the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo of 1848.
And we'll get into that in detail, but here's what I don't want to do. I don't want to let the news cycle just eclipse everything that is important, though. The webinars are important. The topics discussed are critical for people to understand. The education is top-notch. Go to freedomrisingsun.com and sign up for the Thursday webinars every week, 7 p.m. Mountain Time, so 9 p.m. Eastern, etc. Just like a great primetime TV show, but yet it's better because it's constitutional in nature, etc. But I don't want to obliterate what we talk about just because the news cycle pounds us, right? We got to be careful of that.
All right. Well, we'll just kind of hit the low points or whatever of this thing. The very first thing off the docket was the Mexican lawsuit over guns. What a victory. It should have never, ever, ever gotten to this point. But the Mexicans had filed a $10 billion lawsuit. It's a big number. Mexican money's not worth too much, and so they think big numbers have to be on things. But a $10 billion lawsuit against many American firearms manufacturers, and the Supreme Court unanimously says, slam dunk, you guys ain't got no story. But the Mexican president is saying, we got 2 lawsuits going. This one started in 2021. We got another one that's backing it up, and it's against some FFL dealers, I think, out of Arizona, 5 of them, I think. So anyway, they're throwing mud against the wall, trying to stick as much as they can, but unanimously, I mean, Kagan and Jackson even had some very cogent remarks in their write-up about what a slam dunk this thing was. And so,
yeah, and let me give you a quick headline just so for those who are not caught up of kind of the details. The Supreme Court tosses Mexico's $10 billion lawsuit claiming U.S. gunmakers have fueled cartel violence. That's really the story, right? And it was a unanimous shutdown of the Mexican. Problem is, the cartel's probably sued.
Well, here's the deal, though, too. I mean, the truth be known, Obama and his so-called Justice Department and their gun-running deal about the Fast and Furious, these guys have done more to fuel that from the United States than any other single issue, and nobody ever talks about that. I mean, it was an Obama-driven program, and it's like, holy Hannah. Now, Obama was out of office when these lawsuits were filed and everything like that, but the administration was attempting to exacerbate the violence in Mexico by sneaking guns in that were purchased by quote-unquote straw man purchases.
Yeah, they called it Operation Gunwalker or whatever.
Gun Runner.
Right? Gun Runner.
And they may have done a Gunwalker too later. I don't know. I don't remember. But at any rate, so this was a slam dunk, but the Mexican president is saying, we've got another one in the wings that we're going to just slam dunk these guys with. But the Supreme Court unanimously, and really, you could say, oh, it wasn't as broad a decision as the gun manufacturers may have been
that's what they always claim when they lose, right?
That's true.
That's what they say about Richard Mack's case, too.
Yeah, but Richard Mack's case has never been as widely applied as it should have been. If people had their heads out of the dark spot, they would have been saying, this is a monumental case, but they want it to go away. So people don't even refer to it very often. But Mack's case was broad spectrum antibiotics against a lot of things. Talking about being sick and getting better. Okay, see how I tie things in, Sam? I know. You don't need that kind of nonsense. But at any rate, so that was a big deal.
That's a huge win for the Trump administration, too, by the way. And what I wish they'd do is they'd go after the Obama folks and everybody else that literally created a lot of these straw buyers. There had to be United States involvement in all that. It was Operation Gunrunner, but there was really no accountability. Nobody went to jail and all that like they should have. And what we ought to do is back into that, and Trump and Kash Patel and Pam Bondi and a few others need to basically double down and say, hey, wait a minute, we need accountability here. Let's resurrect the Operation Gunrunner and see how that ties in. Because if we're gonna sue, let's use it as a way to bring out the real truth on this thing. That's my take. What do you think, Doctor?
Yeah, I'd like to see those that were perpetrators in this do the perp walk, if you will. Another matter that came up was Karine Jean-Pierre has backed out of the Democrat Party. Here's a facilitator. Here's a commiserator. Here is one of the guilty ones that ought to be brought forth in perpetrating the hoax. It was worse than that. It was a fraud on the American people and Joe Biden's competency. And she is saying, well, I'm going to tell you now, we got too much politics in this thing. And anyway, so she's written a book. She's kind of hawking. It's kind of
so it's really all about money. And when she sees the writing on the wall of how bad it is for the Democratic thugs, she tries to back out and pretend she wasn't at the center of it all. That's really the deal, right?
Right. Okay.
She switches from Democrat to independent is what the deal is, right?
Right, exactly. And honestly, she was probably in as many or more meetings than most people were with Biden and had more firsthand, boots on the ground capability of observing the cratering, the mental cratering, and, well, there's physical as well, but But really, if he can't find his way out of his closet in the morning after he puts his bunny slippers on, and he's shambling about the White House, and she had to have firsthand knowledge about that. And of course, Jake Tapper and all these guys are saying, no, it wasn't us. Nobody would have. So they grumble and gripe about somebody else was.
But the way you do that, go ahead and skip the break. This is too good. The way you do that, though, in my mind, is, hey, Joe steps down, says he's old and incompetent, can't do anything. Now Gene bails and says, oh, my gosh, I'm independent now. What they're really hoping to do is avoid accountability if Trump should come after them. And I think Trump and Patel and Bondi and all these people, they need to go after Gene and go after Joe and go after some of these people. And you can say, well, wait a minute, a lot of these people got pardoned. Well, now the auto pen discussion comes up and we go round and round and round. What we see, though, is a lot of flapping the gums, Doctor, but no real accountability. No one's going after Pierre. No one's going after Biden. No one's going after the FBI director who lied and got caught and everything else, all these different things. And there's just no real mojo to get it done. There's a lot of talk and, we love to point the finger at the other guy as we play partisan politics, but the parties should be over. We should stop this and get to the bottom of it for reals and create, criminals need to go to jail. The problem is they're not and they won't, right?
Right. And that brings us to the next issue. I
Yes,
don't,
sir.
like we say, take this whole program about a recap, but
No, it's
but
worth
there's so
it.
many big things.
It's
big
vital.
Things. It is. Okay, so the next one was what's going on with Trump's big beautiful bill, and therein we could probably take the rest of we could take the rest of the week on this thing, and that all sorts of things come into that. The Bravo Sierra that went on in the House to get that through, the stuff that gone on over the Senate there, and the Trump Musk blow up, let's call it. And the accusations that are going on there, there's been some pretty bold, shall we say, earth-shattering inferences that have gone on out of this thing. And the big beautiful bill, and I, it may all be pretty good theater for everything, just to get everything done the way it is. I mean, the way that ultimately they're going to want to have it turn out. But the big beautiful bill had some big hiccups last week. So. The Trump Musk rollover. It's interesting. Musk may become a hero to the Democrats now. I don't know. They hated his guts 2 weeks ago, but at any rate, that big beautiful bill. And the thing that's really discouraging to me, I just put it this way: Rand Paul was talking about some of the debt issues that are on there, and rightly so. I mean, this massive expansion of the debt ceiling, and everybody said, no, this is just a temporary thing. It's going to be, and Johnson's coming in and saying, well, let's just do it for a couple of years. We kick the can 2 years, 4 years, whatever. They're just kicking the can. But at any rate, that massive debt expansion, you reduce the revenue stream to the government, which is our taxes, which I'm all in favor of, and you don't reduce the expense stream, you got a big problem. And Rand Paul is saying, there's probably at least 4 senators that agree with me. I'm going, 4? That's all you can find in that whole
There
house.
There should be 40. There should be 70. There should be, it's outrageous.
It is, and here's the deal. This is supposed to be the settling. This is where the more diplomatic and scholarly and wise men and women are found. But honestly, and Rand Paul, when he said 4, I thought, 4? Are you kidding me? That's all you guys can put together is a coalition of 4? I have to do it in that voice because you can never, over the radio, you got to do your voice inflection, right? Right, Sam? Anyway,
yes, indeed,
so the big beautiful bill, and I know we're quickly running out of time, but at least for the first half of this program. But then the drone part, that drone part is a massive problem for the United States, and nobody's really. In fact, I tell you how bad I think it was. Even some people in high places in the United States are starting to realize, holy cow! Look what the Ukrainians did with a few smuggled drones, probably less than 150 drones. They attacked, or their plan was to attack 5 Russian air bases. They carried it out on 4. Had some pretty significant, by this low-tech approach. And by the way, the drones completely completely overshadow anything that could be done in Trump's big Gold Dome missile program, because they're so low tech and so low level and all that kind of stuff. But they had this massive thing. The Ukrainians are touting, and I don't believe it's true, but over $7 billion worth of damage on the Russians. The Russians, of course, downplay it, and that's how everything's always going. But this was so. It took 18 months to plan, which tells me if all you can do is put together some significant thing every 18 months and you're in a war, that shows how stretched thin you are. But here's the deal from the United States perspective. These are low tech, and they could happen anywhere. And Hexeth, I believe, if I know correctly now, has pulled back some drone protection technology from Ukraine, because I think he thinks that we got our butts swinging in the wind. I mean, we're out in the woods and our pants are down and things are happening, and there's nobody is really recognizing that this exact same thing could happen. Swarms of drones, and the United States has open borders and all that kind of stuff. Drones are so ubiquitously available. Your kid probably got one for Christmas. Not the exact same stuff, admittedly, but so on. And the United States does not have a good defense against that. And if we had swarms going on, I mean, pick a base. Hill Air Force Base is in Utah. It's a big base. And I-15 runs right past it. I mean, you're within a half a mile of the base when you're driving on I-15. Those drone launches were made from farther away than that. I mean, there's warehouses. I mean, come on, people. They used Russian tractor-trailer rigs to bring them to close there, and they assembled them. They used Russian, citizens to do it. I mean, it is just amazing. But what happened was Putin responded with a hypersonic missile. And those things can have multiple warheads. They can be nuke-tipped, so nuclear, they could be nukes. And anyway, I mean, they're so fast. You think about this, less than 10 minutes, probably closer to 5. To give you some idea, if anybody's been to Denver and they've been to Salt Lake City, launch one in Denver, they can be here in 5 minutes. Okay? And if you had multiple warheads, I mean, just using the cities north of Salt Lake, and they opened their warheads and released them, we got, let's say North Salt Lake, Bountiful, Centerville, Farmington, and Layton could all be hit by nukes 5 minutes after launch. We don't have an adequate missile defense system. And the
sad part about this is, this is a very mixed up story if you don't understand the details of it. Because on one hand, Hexeth says, "Hey, we're going to divert, drone anti-drone technology from the Ukraine to the U.S." Then the U.S. Army plans to flood its forces with drones, every division by 2026. Anyway, all I'm telling you is it becomes very complicated fast. Then they say, well, this dome technology, we're going to roll and do that. Others say the dome technology won't do any good. It's not enough, too late. We don't have advanced stuff enough to even deal with it. Why put it up? The better way is to negotiate diplomatically. I mean, this is a complicated story, Dr. Bradley.
Well, and this, interestingly enough, goes back to an event in my life back in the 1960s. We were debating a intercontinental ballistic missile system that would be a defensive system, similar to what Trump is talking about. In the 80s, I was involved in some assessments and communications and so on and so forth that went for assessing Russian launches that were happening daily, literally. Daily, literally. I mean, sometimes 7 or 8 times a day, that had to be assessed as friend or foe kind of things. This kind of debate has been going on forever, and the technology, I don't believe, even today, and I've been out of it a long time, I got to admit, is not nearly as robust as it should be. With after this long discussion, going back in my life alone, back into the 1960s, and the effectiveness of such an approach was very ineffective. It's a lot of money for very little payback. But at any rate, so here we had low-tech attacks happening against the Russians, high success rate, at least relatively. I mean, they claim 40-plus, bombers were destroyed. Ukraine say this, and Russians say, no, we're going to get them all fixed. And American intelligence is saying probably 20 aircraft were hit and maybe 10 were destroyed. Whatever the number is, it's a wake-up call using low tech. What happens if swarm things happened in the Persian Gulf being launched by some kind of enemy? It happened, maybe got against an aircraft carrier and they had these kind of attacks. I mean, it's just a weird kind of situation. But hypersonic missiles get put into the mix. We don't have such an animal, and we can't defend against such an animal. And the Gold Dome thing wouldn't work for drones, and it probably won't work for hypersonic either. So this is a wake-up call, folks. And
it is. And Hegseth is making a lot of changes here. Hegseth, basically they say the U.S. Army plans $36 billion overhaul, largest in nearly 50 years. So, hey, we shouldn't even have a standing army for more than 2 years, Dr. Bradley.
Well, that's what the Constitution says, but who's reading that thing anyway?
Well, I think we need to pay attention to that and be aware that's what the Constitution says, right?
I'm being facetious, but that's the problem is nobody's paying. And you look at the, and this was not one of the questions, but it came up after someone else asked me. It had to do with our upgrading of our traffic control system. I mean, Pete Buttigieg has been sitting on his butt watching this thing implode around him or collapse or whatever. And this is technology 30, 40 years old that has got orders of magnitude more traffic on it and everything else like that. And we're just not keeping up. And if, Transportation Secretary, this FAA thing, it's all unconstitutional. But if they're in the business, they should keep it current, okay? Okay, then I know we got to have a commercial break here, a news break or something. But an issue that is interesting is this California high-speed rail construction project. And Trump and his Secretary of Transportation had just pulled billions of dollars off of that. This thing has been going. It was supposed to be done by 2020. And it originally had a price, I think, of like $33 billion on it, and now their numbers are saying $128 billion. They haven't laid 1 foot of rail on this thing in California. It's soaking up the money like a sponge. And they say, oh, no, we're making good progress. And of course, Newsom had a stroke over the $4 billion, I think, is what Transportation Secretary withdrew. But to tell you the truth, we are spending money like, you say a drunken sailor, well, they're spending their own money. It's our money, and they're spending it constantly, and that was an issue that came up too. But as you can see, there's tons of stuff in the play, but the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo is being threatened in L.A., and I guess probably after the break we're going to have to come back and talk about that because I know the break's coming up soon. Or you don't have to talk about that. I don't want to direct the program.
Well, here's the problem. Hold on. Trump administration signals it will slash funds for the California high-speed rail project. And the bottom line is all the Democrats are going ballistic. All the Republicans are saying, hey, we got to cut this. But California got over $7 billion already for this thing, and they basically squandered the money. They're over time. They're over budget. It's a disaster failure. But Dr. Bradley, government-funded, controlled transportation is one of the planks of the Communist Manifesto.
Unquestionably.
Why would we want to do that at all?
Well, that's the thing. And right now, they've had 15,000 union workers that have been steadily employed for the last 10 years there. They don't want that gravy train to go away, so they got a power base there struggling for it. And the Dems are saying they'll fund it themselves in California. Great idea. Add to your dumpster fire there for your economics.
So in my opinion, hey, funds need to be pulled. We should have never done the project in the first place. I know you say, well, the project won't get finished. Well, then that just proves why government's a failure. Let that be the star-studded failure of the century, and let us look at real solutions that make progress, not under the government thumb of the Communist Manifesto. Please, people, come on now. All right, we got a lot to discuss. The good doctor's in the house. Dr. Scott Bradley, freedomsrisingsun.com, breaking down his incredible weekly webinars, 7 p.m. Mountain Time every Thursday. Go to freedomsrisingsun.com to get your invite, would you please? Hang tight, more in seconds on your radio.
Pursuing liberty, using the Constitution as our guide. You're listening to Liberty News Radio.
News this hour from townhall.com. I'm Rich Thomason. A tumultuous weekend in Los Angeles as rioters face off against police and National Guardsmen in L.A. The violence broke out after ICE agents enforcing federal immigration law conducted a series of raids. Cars were overturned and set on fire, major thoroughfares blocked. There was looting, rocks, bottles, other objects hurled at police. President Trump is defending his deployment of the National Guard.
We're going to have troops everywhere. We're not going to let this happen to our country. We're not going to let our country be torn apart.
Downtown Los Angeles declared an unlawful assembly area by police. The president's new travel ban is in effect as of today.
The new proclamation prohibits travel to the U.S. by citizens from 12 mainly African and Middle Eastern countries. It also imposes heightened restrictions on people from 7 other countries who are outside the U.S. and don't hold a valid visa. The ban is the latest move in the president's escalating campaign of immigration enforcement and was quickly denounced by groups that provide aid and resettlement help to refugees. Greg Clugston, Washington.
Ukraine says Russia launched 479 drones overnight, the largest nighttime drone attack of the war. Ukraine's Air Force says 20 missiles of various types were also fired at different regions of Ukraine. The UN says such attacks have killed more than 12,000 Ukrainian civilians since the start of the war 3 years ago. A recent escalation in aerial attacks has coincided with a renewal of Russian battlefield drives on eastern and northeastern parts of the roughly 620-mile front line. Watching Wall Street this morning, the Dow is down 103 points, the Nasdaq trading 51 points higher. More on these stories at townhall.com.
Hi, it's Mike Gallagher. I've been thinking, why does it feel like losing weight is harder than ever before? With mixed messages, fad diets, the quick fix injections, even magic coffee. I mean, it's overwhelming. Most people are exhausted trying to fight a battle they cannot win. If you feel this way, trust me, you're not alone. I used to feel that way too. But let me tell you, it's not your fault. Your body is working against you, and the longer you wait, the harder it gets. Do what I did. I called PhD Weight Loss and Nutrition 3 years ago. I lost 53 pounds. I feel terrific, and I've kept the weight off. Make the phone call that can change your life the way it has changed mine. They won't let you fail. Call 855-696-2020. That's 855-696-2020 to schedule your consultation. The first 11 callers who mention the word healthy will get 2 free weeks added to their weight loss package. Call now, 855-696-2020. Mention the keyword healthy to get 2 free weeks. Or visit them at myphdweightloss.com, myphdweightloss.com.
Introducing Managed IT Services from NPI. We offer top-notch data backup and recovery, email spam protection, and network security tailored to your needs and budget. With 20-plus years of experience in the medical field, our HIPAA-certified consultants know what it takes to protect sensitive information. Don't settle for less. Give us a call at 801-706-6980 and experience the difference with Managed IT Services. Remember, your IT support should be fast, efficient, and reliable.
Introducing PrepStartsNow.com, your ultimate guide to readiness and peace of mind. We offer practical preparedness tools, training, and education to take your family's household readiness to the next level. Browse the prep shop for essential products, check out our planning guides, and stay informed with our prep blog. Visit PrepStartsNow.com and subscribe to our emails for exclusive offers, new products, and future events. Remember, preparedness begins with PrepStartsNow.com.
You know where the solution can be found, Mr. President? In churches, in wedding chapels, in maternity wards across the country and around the world. More babies will mean forward-looking adults, the sort we need to tackle long-term, large-scale problems. American babies in particular are likely going to be wealthier, better educated, and more conservation-minded than children raised in still industrializing countries. As economist Tyler Cowen recently wrote, quote, "By having more children, you're making your nation more populous, thus boosting its capacity to solve climate change. The planet does not need for us to think globally and act locally so much as it needs us to think family and act personally. The solution to so many of our problems, at all times and in all places, is to fall in love, get married, and have some kids.
Broadcasting live from atop the Rocky Mountains, the crossroads of the West. You are listening to the Liberty Roundtable Radio Talk Show.
All right, back with you live, ladies and gentlemen. So I want to highlight this really quick. Trump's Big Beautiful Bill. I did a video about this. It's called Trump's Big Beautiful Bill Under Fire. Fiscal Disaster or Smart Strategy. Elon Musk, of course, goes against it, calls it a disgusting abomination, and he's not alone. Anyway, check out the LibertyRoundtable.com. It's a live video there, and it is brought to you by Freedoms, RisingSun.com. When you want to restore the republic, when you want to preserve the nation, think FreedomsRisingSun.com. All right, back to the issue. Donald Trump administration is serious. And I guess they say this. Trump orders the military, justice officials to quell riots in L.A., the EpochTimes.com. L.A. protests intensify on third night as Marines get put on standby. Trump says that, hey, you know what? California officials who work against us on this could face federal charges. The Epoch Times has a good little summary here I'm going to play, and then Dr. Bradley can respond to this. Here it is.
U.S. military confirms National Guard troops on the ground in L.A. amid protests and riots. National Guard troops were confirmed to be Los Angeles after President Donald Trump ordered their deployment over the weekend, following days of protests and riots in the city. The U.S. Northern Command confirmed in a post on social media platform X on Sunday morning that the California National Guard started deploying troops in the Los Angeles area and that some members are already on the ground. Additional information will be provided as units are identified and deployed, the military added, including photos of National Guard troops and other assets. Members of California's National Guard were seen staging early Sunday at the federal complex in downtown Los Angeles that includes the Metropolitan Detention Center, one of several sites where confrontations involving hundreds of people have taken place over the last 2 days. The troops included members of the 79th Infantry Brigade Combat Team, according to a social media post from the U.S. Northern Command that showed dozens of National Guard members with long guns and an armored vehicle. The message was issued just hours after Trump wrote on social media platform Truth Social that the National Guard is doing a great job to quell violence, clashes, and unrest, before he criticized both California Governor Gavin Newsom and Los Angeles Mayor Karen Bass, both Democrats, and accusing them of slow-walking a response to the protests. Earlier Sunday, Bass wrote that the National Guard has not been deployed in the city of Los Angeles, although that came before Northern Command's post. The Epoch Times has contacted Bass's office for comment. These radical left protests, by instigators and often paid troublemakers, will not be tolerated, the president wrote. Also, from now on, masks will not be allowed to be worn at protests. Over the weekend, Trump confirmed in a signed memorandum that he would deploy 2,000 National Guard troops to Los Angeles in response to the violence. In a signal of the administration's approach, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth also warned he could deploy active-duty Marines if violence continues in the area. The deployment also follows clashes near a Home Depot in the heavily Latino city of Paramount, south of Los Angeles, as protesters sought to block Border Patrol vehicles. With some hurling rocks and chunks of cement, federal agents unleashed tear gas, flashbang explosives, and pepper balls. Trump's order also came after clashes in neighboring Compton, where a car was set on fire. Protests continued into the evening in Paramount, with several hundred demonstrators gathered near a donut shop, and authorities holding up barbed wire to keep the crowd back. Crowds also gathered again outside federal buildings in downtown Los Angeles, including a detention center, where local police declared an unlawful assembly and began to arrest people. Officials with Homeland Security defended their immigration enforcement in the city, noting that Immigration and Customs Enforcement officials arrested a 55-year-old illegal immigrant from the Philippines who had multiple criminal convictions. Homeland Security spokeswoman Tricia McLaughlin wrote that he has convictions of assault, theft, burglary, and rape. This
All right,
criminal
go ahead and
illegal
stop that.
alien is who...
So it goes on. It's a big battle here. National Guard arrives in L.A. as unlawful protests close freeways. California Governor Newsom calls Trump National Guard deployment unlawful. L.A. rioters are setting fire to Waymo self-driving vehicles. Terrorist chants heard during L.A. riots. Ali Akbar and other terms being used. It's a sad tale to tell. Break this down, Dr. Bradley. What do you think of all this?
Well, like I say, it's the La Raza has been trying for so many years to try and get back the land that was ceded to the United States at the price of United States gold after we won the Mexican War, which should have never happened. And all of these things are wide and broad topics, but they've been saying that this is Mexican territory. They're going to take it back ultimately and finally. And I don't know if you watched over the weekend all the footage of the Mexican flag making its appearance all along the conflict lines in the streets of L.A. And it's interesting. I lived down in that area, and firsthand. I mean, I lived in Watts, for example. I mean, some of the stuff that happened in '65 was there. '67 in Detroit. I mean, 82nd Airborne, if I recall correctly, got deployed into the Detroit riots. The long, hot summer of the 60s and went over several summers. Maybe we're setting up for that right now. I don't know. But the idea of American troops fixing bayonets against American citizens. Of course, I guess there's not so many citizens, but there would be, I'm sure, in the provocateurs. That's always a disheartening kind of thing. And people, green on green kind of violence. I mean, that's really turmoil. But I think that the provocateurs are really trying to make this a big deal. And it's funny that they're just trying to bring people out that are illegal, and suddenly now we've got cities being burned out. Well, they're not really actually that far along, but it's
Bass being bad. The mayor, Newsom being the governor, they're saying Trump's actions are illegal and against the law because, hey, you're not supposed to turn troops against American citizens, right? Trump saying, hey, you know what? This is an insurrection. This is an invasion, and we're going to take action, and we're going to do it now. Kristi Noem saying we're not going to go down the road of, the riots that took place in L.A. yesteryear. We're not doing that. We're going to stop it before it even gets off the ground to that level. So that's kind of the battle points. Why don't you use the Constitution to kind of break this down for us? Who's right? Who's wrong here?
Well, the whole thing about this habeas corpus thing, let's look at Article 1, Section 9.
Yeah, get on your mic, though.
Okay. Well,
there you go.
The problem
Perfect.
is
Thank
that
you.
mic keeps moving when I'm looking for paperwork, for crying out loud. Anyway.
Sorry about that. You sound good now.
It's not your fault.
I just want to make sure you can be heard good because it's vital commentary.
Okay, you look at Article 1, Section 9, Clause 2. The privilege of habeas corpus shall not be suspended unless when in cases of rebellion or invasion the public safety may require it. Now, some of the Bravo Sierra that's been taught, what was the name? Steve Miller, one of the Trump administrator influencers, was talking about doing that. Suspending habeas corpus. I don't know maybe all across the United States. I don't know, but really, this is habeas corpus suspension. First of all, it's a legislative action, and the president's been claiming it since 1863. Excuse me. When
so the reality is the president doesn't have the right to single-handedly just do that. It's a congressional discussion. So where's Congress? Answer missing in action, right? First of all.
Absolutely. I mean, absolutely everything that's been happening nowadays, the Congress has been asleep at the wheel. And
the reason it's a congressional reality, just so people understand, is because we never want power to be concentrated in the hands of the few at the expense of the many. And that's why Congress is supposed to double down when it comes to war and when it comes to insurrections or virtually what you could call internal war. So Congress is missing in action. And the question becomes, is Trump right? Is this an insurrection or an invasion that would justify this or not? The Democrats are saying no. Trump and team are saying yes. And I don't think we ought to suspend habeas corpus at all. What I do think is we have an invasion, so I don't have any problem putting the National Guard there to stop the rioting and the destruction of private property. But I wouldn't suspend habeas corpus. I would take some of these issues on, individuals at a time. You know,
Well, the thing
I would
is-
look at it and say, who deserves protection and what do they really do? Crimes are not mass. Crimes are individually done or acted upon, right?
Here's the deal. It's kind of like, the Jeeps are coming into L.A. I mean, figuratively speaking, look at it in a military way. They're flying foreign flags, and they're doing this. And they're exacerbating the problem. There's an effort, I think, to escalate this as far as they possibly can. I think what's going on in L.A. vastly approaches the habeas corpus suspension over what Miller was talking about a few weeks ago. I mean, there was such a kind of, oh yeah, we got to suspend habeas corpus. Well,
Too good.
Do we suspend habeas corpus in Bonners Ferry, Idaho? I pick a remote kind of city from where anybody lives. Maybe we got some listeners there. But at any rate, no. Do we suspend habeas corpus all across the United States? No, obviously not. But so habeas corpus, if it were to be suspended, this is far closer to what it would be suspended for, because it is a pretty tumultuous kind of thing. And when they suspend habeas corpus for this rebellion and invasion, I mean, they kind of go sweep up the streets, and the streets were a mess, by the way, but it's from all the debris. But they sweep up everybody, and they kind of bring them into holding tanks or whatever you want to call them. I remember an event that happened in a Montana town back in the 60s, a town I worked in, where the men in the town swept everybody up and tied them to trees because they didn't have jail cells. It's another story. Okay. But at any rate, the idea is you sweep up the streets, and then you bring it into a much less inflammatory kind of situation before judges that are, they're separate from the
In other
executive.
words, that's where due process starts.
Right, and the judges are, okay, you got order in the court kind of thing. Okay, sir, you're charged with blah, blah, blah. What's the evidence against? Okay, there's enough evidence to continue to hold this individual. Or, ma'am, I'm sorry you were out on the street walking your baby in the stroller. Why don't you go home? Kind of thing. I mean, they sort that kind of stuff in a much less inflammatory or agitated kind of environment. And honestly, some of the things I saw back in the 60s when some real troops got involved, I mean, these were combat troops that, had a little bit of experience under their belt, and they got involved. Things settled down very quickly. And so there's something about that we could talk about. There's things about what happened with the insurrection laws that happened under George Bush, and how the governors were pretty upset about how the feds all 50 governors sent a petition to George W. Bush after 9/11 when they made this big run on federal centralized power. And they said, no, don't do that. Let us run our own program. And so, but Gavin Newsom's running a dumpster fire, as we inferred earlier. And so there's some real dynamics going on here. But habeas corpus could go into play, Article 1, Section 9. And the idea of using American troops is such a distasteful thing to me against citizens.
It is. I agree 100%. But when we talk about habeas corpus, though, we don't have to wholesale suspend it, across the nation. We can suspend it in a little area, and then we can basically say, but we're going to give people due process. And if you're an American citizen, and if you have not taken part in the invasion or in the insurrection, then, hey, it can apply to you. What I'm saying is that we don't have to say everybody's guilty and everybody whatever. We can say, hey, we're putting troops on the streets because of the invasion. Hey, you, sir, were not involved in that. If Dr. Bradley goes down there as a reporter that, puts his camera on things and he's trying to document what's going down, but he didn't participate in it. Hey, you should still be able to have your rights. They can ferret that out individuals at a time fairly easily, right?
Yeah, this is not we're taking the whole nation under a martial law kind of thing. And there's nothing in the Constitution that even approaches martial law, the allowance of such a thing. But to tell you the truth, there's people pushing buttons down there in L.A., and I really do believe it's coming from the highest levels. I think the mayor can say, oh, we sure deplore all this violence and everything like that, but I would not be a bit surprised if the mayor wasn't behind the scenes saying, okay, let's get somebody down on this block, on this corner, and we're going to,
so we need to basically put troops on the streets. We need to stop the insurrection and the invasion, protect private property. Then what we need to do is ferret this out and find out who's who. We need to push back very hard. We just talked about the Mexican government lost a big old lawsuit about this. about guns and this kind of stuff with cartels. Hey, let's find out who are cartel members. Let's find out, who was under what orders when and who got funded by whom. And, we really need to drill into this. And the best way you do that is with due process. The best way you do that is to drill into cases individually and say, hey, who's really involved where and when and what, and who's here illegally. And all I'm telling you is if this is done right, this could be a huge solution. If it's done wrong, it could be a disaster and backfire. That's really the bottom line, right?
And that's what they're trying to do. They're trying to get as big a blowback as they possibly can. And honestly, this will bode ill for liberty, regardless of who, quote unquote, wins on this thing. Because when our liberties are lost, they're usually pretty hard to claw back. That's really a big problem. I mean, when we start taking gulps of our God-given rights away and stuff like that, when they could say, hey, wait a minute, wait, we can't have any firearms in the streets in L.A., we're going to seize all firearms. I mean, didn't they do it during Hurricane Katrina? Didn't they have...
And see, I don't accept that. I support the National Guard stopping the destruction of private property and arresting criminals and invaders. When we start to say nobody can have a gun that's a good, honest American citizen, in my mind, we've gone way too far. And this is why I'm telling you, I support what Trump's doing, but we got to be very careful we don't go too far.
We really, truly do.
There's a balance here, folks, is really the point. Dr. Bradley, am I right on this?
Well, yeah,
Are you for it or not?
No, I think you're moving in the right direction. I think the part of the problem, though, and this is maybe a subset of what you're talking about, putting your average everyday National Guardsman into the middle of this mix. Look what happened at the Kent college, university, whatever it was, shooting that happened. You got some trigger happy or some jittery, National Guard people that pulled the trigger when they shouldn't have. I mean, all of this stuff could be resolved with appropriate action, and most of the time you don't shoot first and ask questions later. And I'm a little bit nervous of putting National Guard troops on there. And again, most of them probably, the closest thing they've been to a shootout was watching Gunsmoke on TV. I mean, and that's exactly what happened at Kent State.
And the real balance is, how do you deal with it, though? When you have a liberal mayor like Bass, when you have an extreme governor like Newsom, they'll just let the whole city burn.
Well, and here's a big part of the problem that you say, well, just let those turkeys have California. They cut it off and send it out to the ocean. But there's a lot of really good people that have private property and lives and businesses.
And that's why I justify saying, hey, this has got to stop first. Now, how we carry it out and what lines we draw is another discussion. We need to lean towards due process. We need to lean towards protection of people's rights. But at the same time, if you're an illegal and you're putting up the Mexican flag and you're trying to promote La Raza on our soil, hey, you know what? We've discovered that you don't have due process anymore. We know you're a criminal. We know you're a bad actor designed to overthrow the United States. That's going to stop. On the other hand, the guy down there with the camera, or the guy that has private property that's maybe on his roof trying to defend his store, hey, that's a different matter. What do you expect the guy to do? We need to ferret this out very, very carefully. Trump needs to be very wise and careful here.
Right, and the big hammer isn't always the best solution. And that's
right.
What I'm concerned is that they'll be pushed to the point where the big hammer happens. Now, they can back off and everything like that at some point, but making decisions precipitously with I'm the biggest, baddest guy on the street, and you're not going to, being a bully in something oftentimes has a pretty strong bad outcome. Yeah.
But you can do things, though, in my opinion, though. If you put the right people on the ground that know what they're doing to deal with this, and too bad we don't have the Oath Keepers, because they could be private sector people caring for their country, volunteers like we had. Believe it or not, to me, that was a great solution. Solved a lot of problems in the past. But now we act like these guys are the enemy. But if you had real comms, meaning communications, and you had real people on the ground who know what they're talking about in a volunteer situation, you could literally organize and find the leaders of 90% of this and take out some of those leaders. And when I say take out, I mean, hey, if they'll cooperate, we could, arrest them and everything else. If necessary, we might have to use lethal force against a few if they're known drug cartel or gang leaders or whatever. You could take out, and I'm telling you, I don't know how many people are on the streets there, but you could take out, 50, 100, 200, 500, people that are the coordinators of all this, and I bet you 90% of it would stop very easily if you got on the ground and knew what you were doing.
Well, and that's likely true. And, the old saying, you cut the head off the snake's no longer lethal. I'm concerned that in L.A. we do have some very highly placed people, and when the voice of the people is chosen, bad leadership, criminal leadership, if you will, and let's just back it off a little bit and take something that's less inflammatory but much more inflammatory. The fires we had here a year ago because of the leadership or lack thereof in L.A. and the L.A. Fire Department and everything, the DEI hires that had completely blown the situation. We have lost track of what really is, it's the right people in the right place. And for some reason, the whole nation seems to be on a track that says, oh, wait a minute. Yeah, we can put people like the fire chief in L.A. that was unqualified to hold that position, or the leader of
immoral
the Secret
people always
Service.
end up with failed leadership. That's a principle that we got to understand too. So anyway, I'm just recommending caution. I think if you do the right things, you could minimize the effect of this and not have blowback if you're careful, Trump. But you've got to get the right people in the right places. And I'm telling you right now, we have enough Americans that are retired military and this and that could voluntarily go down there, just set up a communications network and direct people to the right places to take out the leadership of this thing that's going sideways. And you could do it very easily, very carefully. And I hope that's the road we go down. If we let the news cycle promote troops on the streets and we let it go to the next level, we're going to lose this battle. Not because we weren't right on the points, but because the way we handled it went too far. For example, I don't know if you know, but even Kash Patel, FBI Director Kash Patel on Joe Rogan said, my house just got swatted yesterday. This was several days ago now, but this is what I'm talking about. We have got to find out the bad guys easily and quickly. And the way you do it is you put the right people with knowledge all over on the ground in the city, volunteers that can report back. They're not armed. They're not, shoot to kill, no, but they have communications, and they can literally find out. You can see who the leaders are if you know what you're watching for. I'm telling you right now. Now, you can say, well, Sam, you've never been in the military. You don't know what you're talking about. I guarantee I get on top 10 military leaders, and they'll tell you that's the way it is. That's the way you do it. You find the leadership, and you remove that ill element leadership, and most of the people are going to be directionless. The paid, provocateurs and everything else, they're not going to know where to go or what to do anymore. And I mean, that's true in these situations, right?
It is indeed. And the problem we've got is we've probably got, to use the term, render riot people that are there, where they come in at the request of the provocateurs. They're already prepaid. They're positioned. They're, they get chits to go stay in hotel rooms at night and get their meals paid for. I mean, this is a big deal. And like you say, you take out the ones, and they're fairly easily identified. Somebody's got to be monitoring the radio chatter and zeroing in on some of those things. I mean, it is, in a way, you hate to say it, kind of a military operation because that's being treated as such by those that are attempting. But it can be done
with volunteers with comms, though, no weapons, so that it doesn't backfire and get crazier. In other words, we don't want to escalate. We want to de-escalate. And the way you de-escalate is put knowledgeable people with communications down there. You find out how the other guys are communicating and disrupt that communications and or even shut that communications down. And you say, well, that's bad, Sam. And my response is temporarily till you get some of these leaders. No, it's not. It's the most peaceful solution. So we need to think de-escalation, people. That's what I'm telling you. And there's ways to do this. There's absolutely ways to accomplish this.
In the military settings, we used to use the term C-cubed-I, command, control, communications, and intelligence.
Amen.
And that's the kind of thing that's got to be brought forth on this. And with the appropriate C-cubed-I, any kind of these confrontations can normally be handled much more efficiently and better than if you just go in there like milling ants and.
That's why I don't like to hear that troops are there with long guns. That's not we need to go about it differently, folks. I'm telling you right now, there's a way to de-escalate this mess and not get egg on our face while standing up for private property, life, liberty, and property. We can do this, folks. Trump needs to be wise and be surrounded by good people that aren't hawkish, that are good, kind de-escalators. That's what we need on the ground, in my humble opinion. Take it for what it's worth. Dr. Bradley, thank you, sir.
Well, good to be back again, Sam. So we'll probably talk to you at the end of the week.
Roger that. FreedomsRisingSun.com is his website. Sign up for his weekly webinars. I'm Sam Bushman. God save our republic.